In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the line between life and death is measured in heartbeats, a story unfolded that would forever change how the most elite warriors in the world viewed combat medicine. This isn't just another tale of military heroism, it's the story of someone who shattered every preconceived notion about what it means to be just a medic. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The year was 2018, and Navy SEAL Team 6 was preparing for one of their most dangerous missions yet. Deep in the Hindu Kush mountains, intelligence had located a high-value target at Taliban, commander responsible for orchestrating attacks that had claimed dozens of American lives. The mission would require a surgical strike in hostile territory, where every second counted and every decision could mean the difference between coming home or being carried out in a flag-draped coffin. As the team gathered for their pre-mission briefing, there was an unusual addition to their ranks. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Sarah Martinez stood quietly in the corner, her medical bag secured tightly to her vest, her eyes scanning the tactical maps with the same intensity as the seasoned operators around her. At 5'4" and weighing barely 130 pounds, she looked almost fragile among the towering, battle-hardened SEALs. But appearances, as they would soon learn, could be devastatingly deceiving. The team leader, a grizzled veteran with 3 combat deployments under his belt, glanced at Martinez with barely concealed skepticism. In his 15 years of special operations, he had worked with many combat medics, and while he respected their life-saving skills, he had never encountered one who could truly hold their own when the bullets started flying. In his mind, medics were there to patch people up, not to engage the enemy. They were support personnel, valuable certainly, but not frontline fighters. "Listen up, Martinez," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Your job is simple. Stay back, keep your head down, and be ready to work on anyone who gets hit. We don't need you playing hero out there. Leave the fighting to us." Martinez nodded silently, but those who knew her well would have recognized the fire that flickered behind her calm exterior. This wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. What her new teammates didn't know was that Sarah Martinez had grown up in the rough neighborhoods of East Los Angeles, where survival meant learning to fight before you learned to read. Her father, a Marine Corps veteran, had taught her that strength wasn't about size, it was about will, determination, and the refusal to back down when everything was on the line. After high school, while her classmates were heading off to college or starting families, Martinez had enlisted in the Navy with a singular goal: to serve on the front lines alongside America's elite warriors. She had excelled in every phase of her medical training, graduating at the top of her class from Field Medical Service School. But that wasn't enough for her. During her off-duty hours, she trained relentlessly in combat tactics, marksmanship, and close-quarters combat. She studied every manual, watched every training video, and pushed herself to physical limits that would have broken most people. Her instructors noticed her dedication, but they also saw the same thing everyone else saw: a small-framed medic who, despite her enthusiasm, would never be anything more than a support player in the grand theater of special operations. They encouraged her medical pursuits while gently steering her away from what they considered unrealistic combat aspirations. But Martinez had a secret weapon that none of them could have anticipated: an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure and an intuitive understanding of battlefield dynamics that couldn't be taught in any classroom. During training exercises, while other medics focused solely on their medical responsibilities, Martinez was constantly analyzing the tactical situation, anticipating where the action would be heaviest, and positioning herself not just to treat casualties, but to support the mission in whatever way necessary. As the team prepared to board their transport helicopter, Martinez checked her gear one final time. In addition to her comprehensive medical supplies, she carried a modified M4 carbine that she had personally zeroed and customized. Her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, was worn smooth from countless hours of practice. She had requested and been granted additional ammunition, claiming it was for extended mission scenarios, but the truth was, she had no intention of being a passive observer if the situation demanded action. The helicopter's rotors churned the dusty air as they lifted off into the Afghan night. Around her, the SEALs were going through their final mental preparations. Each man focused on his specific role in the upcoming operation. Martinez closed her eyes and visualized the mission from every angle, not just where she would set up her casualty collection point, but where the enemy would likely position their defenses, what routes the team would use for extraction, and how she could best support the overall mission success. What none of them could have predicted was that in less than 6 hours, this just a medic would be demonstrating combat skills that would leave even the most experienced operators questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare, courage, and the true meaning of being a warrior. The insertion went flawlessly. Under cover of darkness, the team fast-roped from their helicopter into a remote valley 30 kilometers from their target. The night was crystal clear, with a moon that provided just enough illumination for their night vision equipment to give them a decisive advantage. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Martinez matched their pace effortlessly, her smaller frame allowing her to navigate obstacles that forced some of the larger operators to find alternate routes. The target compound was a fortified structure built into the mountainside, with multiple defensive positions and clear fields of fire covering all approaches. Intelligence estimated between 15 and 20 enemy fighters, all experienced Taliban veterans who had been fighting American forces for years. The plan was surgical. Fast insertion, eliminate the target, extract any valuable intelligence, and disappear before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Martinez established her casualty collection point in a natural depression approximately 100 meters from the compound, within easy reach of the assault teams, but protected from direct fire. As she set up her medical station, she couldn't help but notice several tactical problems with their current positioning. The depression that provided her with cover also created a natural choke point that could trap wounded operators if the enemy flanked their position. More concerning, the primary extraction route passed directly through an area that would be exposed to fire from a guard tower that the intelligence reports had failed to identify. She keyed her radio. Actual, this is Doc. I've got eyes on a structure that wasn't in our briefing. Guard tower, approximately 200 meters northeast of the primary target. It's got commanding fields of fire over our extraction route. The team leader's voice crackled back through her earpiece. Copy, Doc, we see it. Stay in position and maintain radio silence unless you've got casualties. Martinez frowned. The dismissive tone suggested they weren't taking her observation seriously. She studied the tower through her scope and felt her blood chill. The position was perfectly situated to turn their withdrawal into a killing field. She could see movement. In the structure, at least 2, possibly 3 fighters with what appeared to be a heavy machine gun. The assault began at 0347 hours. The SEALs moved like ghosts, their suppressed weapons creating whispered death as they eliminated the outer sentries. For the first 10 minutes, everything went according to plan. They breached the compound, neutralized several enemy fighters, and began searching for their high-value target. Then everything went wrong. The Taliban commander wasn't just a strategic leader. He was a cunning tactician who had survived multiple American raids by always staying one step ahead of his enemies. The compound was a trap, designed to draw elite forces into a carefully orchestrated ambush. As the SEALs moved deeper into the structure, hidden fighters emerged from concealed positions, and the night exploded with automatic weapons fire. Contact! Contact! We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. The team leader's voice was strained as bullets shattered the stone walls around them. Martinez watched through her night vision as muzzle flashes erupted from windows throughout the compound. But her attention was focused on the guard tower she had identified earlier. Just as she had predicted, the fighters there were repositioning their heavy weapon to target the extraction route. In less than 60 seconds, they would have a clear shot at any wounded operators being evacuated from the compound. Actual, this is Doc. That tower is about to light up our extraction route. You need to neutralize it now. Negative, Doc. All teams are engaged. Maintain your position. Martinez watched as one of the assault team members stumbled out of the compound, blood streaming down his arm. Behind him, 2 more operators were dragging a third who was clearly seriously wounded. They were heading directly into the kill zone. She had identified. For a split second, Martinez faced the defining moment of her military career. She could follow orders, stay in position, and watch her teammates walk into an ambush that would likely kill them all. Or she could trust her training, her instincts, and her absolute certainty that she was the only person in position to prevent a catastrophe. She made her choice. Grabbing her rifle, Martinez sprinted from her concealed position toward a rocky outcropping that would give her a clear shot at the guard tower. The distance was nearly 300 meters, a challenging shot under perfect conditions, nearly impossible while moving under combat stress. But Martinez had spent countless hours practicing exactly this scenario, knowing that someday her teammates' lives might depend on her ability to make the impossible shot. She reached the outcropping just as the heavy machine gun in the tower swung toward the extraction route. Through her scope, she could see the gunner's face clearly, a bearded man in his 30s, his eyes intense with concentration as he prepared to unleash devastating fire on the wounded Americans below. Martinez controlled her breathing, let her heartbeat slow, and gently squeezed the trigger. The suppressed rifle coughed once, and 300 meters away, the enemy gunner pitched backward. But there were 2 more fighters in the tower, and they were already turning their attention toward her muzzle flash. That's when Martinez did something that would become legend among the special operations community. Instead of taking cover and calling for backup, she stood up, transitioned to rapid semi-automatic fire, and engaged both remaining targets with a speed and accuracy that left even experienced snipers speechless. 3 shots, 3 kills, the guard tower fell silent, but Martinez wasn't finished yet. As the echo of Martinez's rifle faded into the night, the tactical situation on the ground shifted dramatically. The elimination of the guard tower had removed the most significant threat to their extraction route, but it had also revealed Martinez's position to every enemy fighter in the compound. Within seconds, she found herself under intense fire from multiple directions. Most medics would have immediately sought cover and called for help. Martinez did something entirely different. She had studied the compound's layout extensively during their mission planning, and she realized that her current position offered something no one else had considered: a clear line of sight into the compound's central courtyard, where the majority of enemy fighters were now repositioning to counter the SEAL assault. "This is Doc," she radioed calmly, even as bullets whined off the rocks around her. "I have eyes on at least 6 enemy fighters moving to flank Bravo team from the south. I can interdict if you need me to." The team leader's response was immediate and sharp. "Negative, Doc. Get to cover and stay there." "That's an order." But Martinez could see what he couldn't. The enemy fighters were moving with tactical precision, using covered routes and mutual support that suggested they were far more organized than intelligence had indicated. In less than 2 minutes, they would be in position to catch the SEAL assault team in a devastating crossfire. The Americans were walking into a trap, and she was the only person who could prevent it, making a decision that would define her career and earn her a place in special operations legend. Martinez ignored the direct order. She shifted position to get a better angle on the enemy movement and began engaging targets with methodical precision. Her first shot took down the enemy point man, a fighter who was seconds away from reaching a position that would have allowed him to roll grenades into the SEAL team's location. Her second shot eliminated the team's communications operator, disrupting their coordination. Her third and fourth shots forced the remaining fighters to take cover in positions that left them exposed to the SEAL assault team's advance. "What the hell?" came the voice of one of the SEAL operators over the radio. "Someone just lit up those guys who were about to flank us. Doc, was that you?" The team leader's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "Affirmative," Martinez replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "You've got at least 2 more fighters trying to reposition from. You're 10 o'clock. I can see them, but I don't have a clear shot from here." There was a brief pause before the team leader responded. "Copy that, Doc. Can you maintain overwatch on our 6? For the next 45 minutes, Martinez provided something that had never been part of her official job description: precision sniper support for one of the most elite military units in the world. From her position on the rocky outcropping, she could see tactical developments that the operators inside the compound couldn't. She called out enemy movements, identified threats, and when necessary, eliminated targets that posed immediate dangers to her teammates. Her shooting was nothing short of extraordinary. At ranges exceeding 400 meters, using iron sights and limited visibility, she made shots that would have challenged the best snipers in the military. But more than her marksmanship, it was her tactical awareness that impressed the SEALs. She anticipated enemy movements, identified weak points in their defenses, and provided intelligence that allowed the assault team to complete their mission with minimal casualties. The high-value target was captured alive, along with a treasure trove of intelligence that would lead to the disruption of multiple terrorist networks. But as they prepared for extraction, Martinez faced her most challenging moment yet. One of the SEAL operators, Petty Officer First Class Mike Thompson, had been hit by shrapnel from a grenade and was bleeding heavily from a leg wound. The injury wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it would prevent him from moving quickly enough to reach the extraction point before enemy reinforcements arrived. "Doc, we need you here now." The team leader called over the radio. Martinez was faced with a tactical dilemma. Thompson was wounded in the compound's courtyard, which was still partially controlled by enemy fighters. To reach him, she would have to cross 200 meters of open ground that was covered by at least 3 different enemy positions. It was exactly the kind of situation her instructors had warned her about the moment when a medic's desire to save lives could compromise the entire mission. But as she looked through her scope at Thompson, who was trying to apply pressure to his own wound while continuing to fight, Martinez realized that everything she had trained for, everything she had sacrificed for, had led to this moment. She wasn't just a medic who happened to be a good shot. She was a warrior who happened to have medical training. "I'm coming to you," she radioed, already moving down from her overwatch position. "Negative, Doc. It's too hot down here." "Then make it cooler," Martinez replied with a grim smile. "I'll be there in 60 seconds. What happened next would be talked about in special operations circles for years to come, and would forever change how the military viewed the role of combat medics in elite units. Martinez's sprint across the open courtyard would later be described by witnesses as one of the most audacious combat maneuvers they had ever seen. But in that moment, focused entirely on reaching her wounded teammate, she wasn't thinking about heroics or making history. She was thinking about the fundamentals her father had drilled into her as a child: move fast, stay low, and never give. Your enemy a stationary target. The first burst of enemy fire came from a window on the 2nd floor of the compound. Martinez didn't break stride, but she did something that shocked every SEAL watching. She returned fire while running, placing 3 perfectly aimed shots into the window and silencing the threat without slowing down. "Holy shit," breathed one of the operators. "Did she just..." "Eyes on your sectors," barked the team leader, but even his voice carried a note of amazement. Martinez reached Thompson's position in 43 seconds, diving into cover behind a low stone wall just as another burst of automatic weapons fire chewed up the ground. Where she had been running, Thompson was conscious but pale, his hands pressed against a wound in his thigh that was bleeding more heavily than Martinez had initially realized. "How bad?" she asked, her hands already moving with practiced efficiency. As she assessed the injury, "Bad enough," Thompson grimaced. "Shrapnel went deep. I think it might have nicked the femoral." Martinez's examination confirmed her worst fears. The wound was dangerously close to the femoral artery, and while it hadn't been completely severed, any significant movement could finish the job and cause Thompson to bleed out in minutes. Under normal circumstances, this would be a textbook case for immediate evacuation to a field hospital. But they were 300 kilometers from the nearest medical facility, surrounded by enemy fighters, and extraction wasn't possible for at least another 20 minutes. "I need to get pressure on this and get you stabilized," Martinez said, pulling medical supplies from her pack. "But first, we need to clear out the welcoming committee." As if summoned by her words, 3 Taliban fighters appeared at the far end of the courtyard, moving in tactical formation toward their position. They had clearly identified the Americans' location and were moving to finish them off. Thompson tried to raise his rifle, but the movement caused blood to pulse from his wound. "Doc, I can't. Don't move," Martinez ordered, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I've got this." What happened next would be replayed in training videos for years to come. Martinez, kneeling beside her wounded teammate with one hand maintaining pressure on his wound, used her free hand to engage 3 enemy fighters at a range of approximately 75 meters. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter instantly. Her second shot forced the other 2 to take cover behind a pile of rubble. But Martinez had studied the compound's layout extensively, and she knew that their cover position had a fatal flaw. It was exposed to enfilade fire from her current angle. She shifted slightly, never releasing pressure on Thompson's wound, and placed 2 more shots that eliminated both remaining threats. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 seconds. "Doc," Thompson said weakly, "where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" "East LA," Martinez replied simply as she began working to stabilize his wound. "You learn to multitask when your homework includes dodging drive-bys," but their tactical situation was far from resolved. Martinez's radio crackled with increasingly urgent reports from the other teams. Enemy reinforcements were arriving faster than anticipated, and the extraction helicopter was being delayed by mechanical problems. They were looking at least another 30 minutes before they could get out of the compound. Thompson's wound required constant pressure and monitoring. Moving him before she had properly stabilized the injury would almost certainly kill him. But staying in their current position meant they would be sitting targets when the next wave of enemy fighters arrived. Martinez found herself facing the most challenging decision of her military career. She could focus entirely on Thompson's medical needs and hope the other team members could provide enough security to keep them alive. Or she could continue to contribute to the tactical situation, knowing that any distraction from Thompson's care could cost him his life. The decision was made for her when her radio exploded with frantic calls for help. "All stations, this is Bravo 1. We're being overrun from the north. Multiple enemy fighters, I repeat. We are being overrun." Through the compound's northern wall, Martinez could see muzzle flashes erupting from at least a dozen weapons. The enemy had brought in significant reinforcements, and they were launching a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the SEALs through sheer numbers. "Doc, can you see anything from your position?" The team leader's voice was strained with stress. Martinez raised her head cautiously above the stone wall and immediately identified the problem. The enemy fighters were using a drainage ditch to approach the compound's northern wall under cover. Once they reached the wall, they would be able to breach the perimeter and attack the SEAL teams from behind. She could also see the solution. There was a natural choke point in the drainage ditch, approximately 150 meters from her position, where the enemy fighters would be forced to bunch together to navigate around a large boulder. A single well-placed shot at the right moment could eliminate multiple targets and disrupt their entire assault. But taking that shot would require her to release pressure on Thompson's wound for at least 15 seconds, and there was no guarantee she could re-establish control of his bleeding before he went into shock. Thompson, despite his weakening condition, seemed to read her thoughts. "Doc, whatever you're thinking, do it. I'm not worth getting everyone killed." "Shut up," Martinez replied firmly. "You're all worth it. That's why we're all going home." She looked at Thompson's wound one more time, calculating blood loss rates and time factors with the precision of an emergency room physician. Then she made a decision that would either save her entire team or cost Thompson his life. "I need you to maintain pressure on your own wound for exactly 15 seconds, she said. "Can you do that?" Thompson nodded weakly but placed his hands over the field dressing she had applied. Martinez raised her rifle, found her target through the scope, and waited for the perfect moment. The drainage ditch assault was precisely the kind of coordinated attack that had made the Taliban such effective fighters against conventional forces. They were using terrain features expertly, maintaining disciplined fire control, and timing their advance to coincide with diversionary attacks from other directions. Against a typical military unit, it would have been devastating. But Martinez could see something the enemy commanders couldn't. Their entire plan depended on maintaining momentum through the choke point she had identified. If she could disrupt their advance at exactly the right moment, their coordinated assault would collapse into chaos. She controlled her breathing, let her heartbeat slow, and watched through her scope as the first group of fighters approached the boulder that created the natural bottleneck. 8 men moving in good tactical formation, completely unaware that they were about to enter a killing field. The lead fighter reached the choke point. Martinez's finger tightened on the trigger, but she forced herself to wait. Patience was everything. If she fired too early, she would only get 1 or 2 targets. If she waited for the perfect moment, the entire enemy assault team bunched together as they navigated around the boulder, exactly as Martinez had predicted. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. Her first shot took down the lead fighter, causing the others to cluster together instinctively as they sought cover. Her second shot eliminated the team's radio operator, cutting off their communications with other enemy units. Her third and fourth shots created panic among the remaining fighters, who began firing wildly in all directions without clear targets. The coordinated assault dissolved into chaos in less than 10 seconds. "Bravo 1, this is Doc," Martinez radioed, even as she immediately returned her attention to Thompson's wound. "Enemy assault from the north has been disrupted. You should have breathing room for at least 5 minutes. Doc, I don't know what you just did, but we can see them scattering," came the relieved response. "How the hell did you, Thompson?" "Needs immediate extraction," Martinez interrupted, noting that his pulse was becoming weaker. "I've stabilized him, but he needs a real surgeon in the next hour, or we're going to lose him." She had managed to control the bleeding, but Thompson had already lost significant blood, and his body was beginning to show signs of shock. His skin was clammy, his breathing was shallow, and despite her best efforts, she could see that his condition was deteriorating. "Doc," Thompson whispered, "I can't feel my leg." Martinez's blood chilled. Loss of sensation could indicate nerve damage, or worse, it could mean that his blood pressure had dropped to dangerously low levels. She checked his pulse again and confirmed. Her fears his heart rate was increasing as his body tried to compensate for blood loss, but his blood pressure was dropping steadily. "Stay with me, Thompson," she said firmly. "You're going to be fine, but I need you to stay conscious." But even as she spoke, Martinez knew they were running out of time. Thompson needed a blood transfusion and surgical intervention that she couldn't provide in the field. The extraction helicopter was still 15 minutes out, and she wasn't sure Thompson could last that long without additional medical support. That's when she made another decision that would become part of Special Operations legend: preparing. And narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Martinez began performing battlefield medicine at a level that most doctors wouldn't attempt outside of a fully equipped emergency room. Using techniques she had learned in advanced trauma courses and refined through countless hours of study, she established an 4-line under combat conditions and began administering emergency fluids to help stabilize Thompson's blood pressure. But the procedure required her complete attention, which meant she couldn't maintain her overwatch position or respond to tactical developments around the compound. For the first time since the mission began, Martinez was entirely focused on her medical responsibilities. That the timing couldn't have been worse. Contact from the east. The radio exploded with urgent calls as a new group of enemy fighters launched an assault on the compound's weakest defensive position. We've got at least 10 fighters moving on our position. Martinez could hear the intensity of the firefight escalating, but she couldn't look up from Thompson's IV line. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and she could cause an air embolism. That would kill him instantly. "Doc, we need eyes on the eastern approach," the team leader called. "I can't," Martinez replied, her voice tight with concentration. "I'm in the middle of a medical procedure. If I stop now, Thompson dies." Through her peripheral vision, she could see muzzle flashes getting closer to their position. The new enemy assault was better organized than the previous attacks, and the SEALs were being forced to fall back toward the center of the compound. Thompson grabbed her arm weakly. "Doc, leave me. The team needs you." "The team needs all of us," Martinez replied firmly, never taking her eyes off the IV line. "And I don't leave people behind." But she could see the tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. The enemy fighters were using classic fire and movement tactics, with some elements providing covering fire while others advanced. In less than 5 minutes, they would overrun the compound entirely. Martinez finished establishing the IV line and checked Thompson's vital signs. His blood pressure had stabilized slightly, but he was still in critical condition. Moving him now would be extremely risky, but staying in their current position would be suicide. She made a decision that would require her to perform battlefield medicine and tactical operations simultaneously, something that had never been attempted in Special Operations history. "Thompson, I'm going to set up a portable 4-bag that you can monitor yourself," she said, preparing the equipment with practiced efficiency. "I need you to watch the drip rate and tell me if anything changes." "Doc, what are you planning?" Martinez checked her rifle and estimated the ammunition she had remaining. "I'm going to keep you alive and keep us from being overrun." At the same time, what she was proposing was medically dangerous and tactically insane. But it was also their only chance of survival, the portable 4 setup that Martinez rigged for. Thompson was a masterpiece of battlefield improvisation. Using a combination of standard medical equipment and tactical gear, she created a system that would allow Thompson to monitor his own fluid intake while giving her the mobility she needed to continue fighting. "Every 2 minutes, I need you to tell me your status," she instructed, positioning Thompson behind the thickest part of the stone wall. "If you start feeling dizzy, nauseous, or if you can't feel your pulse, you call out immediately." Thompson nodded weakly, but Martinez could see the respect in his eyes. In 15 years of special operations, he had never seen anyone attempt what she was about to try. Martinez positioned herself at the corner of the stone wall, where she could maintain visual contact with Thompson while having clear fields of fire toward the advancing enemy fighters. Her rifle had approximately 60 rounds remaining, and she had 2 additional magazines in her vest. Against 10 or more enemy fighters, she would need to make every shot count. The first enemy fighter appeared around the eastern wall of the compound, moving cautiously but with obvious tactical competence. Martinez watched him through her scope, noting his equipment, his movement patterns, and the way he communicated with his teammates. These weren't the disorganized fighters they had faced earlier. These were experienced veterans who understood military tactics. "Thompson, status check," she whispered. "Still here, Doc," came the weak but steady reply. "4 is flowing normally." Martinez identified the enemy team leader, recognizable by his position in the formation, and the way the other fighters looked to him for signals. Taking him out first would disrupt their coordination and buy precious time for the extraction. She lined up her shot, controlled her breathing, and gently squeezed the trigger. The enemy leader pitched backward, and immediately the advancing fighters began firing in all directions, trying to identify the source of the shot. But Martinez had already shifted position, using the confusion to relocate 15 meters to a better firing angle. Her second shot eliminated the enemy team's automatic riflemen, significantly reducing their firepower. Her third shot forced the remaining fighters to take cover in positions that left them exposed to the SEAL team's defensive fire. "Bravo 1, this is Doc," she radioed. "Eastern Assault Team has been disrupted. You should be able to advance and clear the remaining fighters." "Copy that, Doc. We're moving now." But Martinez's radio crackled with a new emergency call that made her blood run cold. "Actual, this is Charlie Team. We've got a problem. Major problem. Enemy reinforcements are moving up the valley in vehicles. At least 3 trucks, possibly more. ETA 5 minutes. Martinez felt her heart sink. Vehicle-mounted reinforcements would bring heavy weapons, communications equipment, and possibly 20 or 30 additional fighters. The small SEAL team, already stretched thin by casualties and ammunition expenditure, would be completely overwhelmed. She looked at Thompson, who was barely conscious but still monitoring his 4-line with determination. The extraction helicopter was still 10 minutes out, and they had enemy reinforcements arriving in 5 minutes. The mathematics of survival were working against them. That's when Martinez remembered something from her study of the compound's layout during mission planning. The access road that the enemy vehicles would have to use passed through a narrow canyon approximately 800 meters from the compound. It was a natural choke point, but it was also well beyond the effective range of her rifle, or was it? During her advanced marksmanship training, Martinez had achieved qualifying scores at ranges up to 1,000 meters, but those had been under perfect conditions with unlimited time and precision equipment. What she was considering now was a shot that would challenge even dedicated sniper teams. But she also remembered something her father had told her when she was learning to shoot as a child. "Mia, don't shoot to make the impossible shot. Shoot to make the necessary shot." Martinez studied the topography through her scope, calculating wind direction, elevation changes, and target movement. The enemy vehicles would have to slow down to navigate the narrow canyon road, giving her a brief window when they would be moving predictably. "Thompson, I need to move to a different position," she said. "Higher elevation, better angle." "Doc," Thompson's voice was weak but urgent, "if you leave this position, you won't be able to get back here before the ground assault hits us." Martinez realized he was right. The eastern enemy fighters had been disrupted but not eliminated, and more were certainly coming. If she moved to engage the vehicle reinforcements, she would be abandoning Thompson and leaving a gap in the compound's defenses that could prove fatal. She was facing an impossible choice: attempt a long-range shot that might stop the vehicle reinforcements but would certainly expose Thompson and the defensive perimeter, or maintain her current position and hope the SEAL teams could somehow handle 30 additional enemy fighters with heavy weapons. Through her scope, she could see dust clouds in the distance marking the approach of the enemy vehicles. In 4 minutes, they would reach the choke point. In 10 minutes, the extraction helicopter would arrive. And somewhere in between, decisions would be made that would determine whether any of them lived to see the sunrise. Martinez made her choice. "Thompson, I'm going to need you to do something that's going to hurt like hell," she said, already beginning to pack up the medical equipment. "But it might save all of our lives." "What do you need, Doc?" "I need you to be a SEAL for the next 10 minutes. Instead of a patient." What Martinez was asking of Thompson would have been extraordinary under normal circumstances. With a severe leg wound, significant blood loss, and an IV line keeping him stable, she needed him to not just survive, she needed him to fight. "I'm going to give you a painkiller that will keep you functional for about 15 minutes, she explained, preparing the carefully measured injection. "But after that, you're going to crash hard. I need those 15 minutes to get to high ground and stop those vehicles." Thompson gritted his teeth as Martinez administered the injection. Within seconds, his eyes cleared and some color returned to his face. The medication wouldn't heal his wound, but it would block the pain and give him a temporary surge of energy. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice stronger than it had been in the past hour. "Cover the eastern approach. Don't let anyone get past this position. Can you do that?" Thompson checked his rifle and nodded grimly. "Doc, if you're going where I think you're going, you'll be completely exposed. There's no cover on that ridge." Martinez was already moving, gathering her equipment for what might be the longest shot of her life. Sometimes the best cover is making sure nobody's left alive to shoot at you. She sprinted toward a rocky outcropping that rose approximately 200 meters above the compound. It was a grueling climb under normal conditions, nearly impossible while carrying full combat gear and precision weapons. But Martinez had trained for exactly this scenario, pushing herself through mountain warfare courses that most male operators found challenging. As she climbed, her radio crackled with increasingly desperate reports from the teams below. "Vehicle. Convoy is 3 minutes out," came the urgent call. "We can see mounted heavy weapons. This is going to get ugly fast." Martinez reached the summit of the ridge with 90 seconds to spare. Through her scope, she could see the dust trail of the Khalid. Approaching vehicles winding through the valley. 3 trucks, just as intelligence had reported, but her enhanced view revealed something that chilled her blood. The lead vehicle was mounting what appeared to be a heavy machine gun. Possibly a .50 caliber weapon that could tear through the compound stone walls like paper. The range to the target area was 847 meters. The wind was gusting from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. The vehicles would be moving at roughly 30 kilometers per hour through the canyon. She would have 1 shot at the lead vehicle, possibly 2 if she was extraordinarily lucky. Martinez had trained for shots at this range, but never under these conditions. Never with the lives of her entire team depending on a single bullet. Never with wounded teammates counting on her to be in 2 places at once. She settled into her shooting position, using techniques learned from the Marine Corps' most elite snipers. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied, and the chaos of the battle below faded into background noise. In this moment, there was only the rifle, the target, and the physics of a bullet traveling nearly 900 meters. Through her scope, she watched the lead vehicle approach the canyon. The driver was maintaining a steady speed, confident that his heavy weapons would be more than sufficient to overwhelm the small American force. He had no idea that a 5'4" medic was tracking his every movement from a ridgeline. He couldn't even see. Martinez made final adjustments for wind and elevation. At this range, she wasn't just shooting at a vehicle, she was shooting at a specific point in space where the vehicle would be by the time her bullet arrived. It was a calculation that required perfect timing, perfect technique, and a considerable amount of luck. The vehicle entered her target zone. Martinez exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled for what seemed like an eternity. At that range, even traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, it would take more than a full second to reach its target. Martinez watched through her scope as the vehicle continued forward, the driver unaware that death was racing toward him at supersonic speed. The impact was devastating. Martinez's bullet struck the vehicle's engine block, and the truck immediately veered off the narrow road, crashed into the canyon wall, and exploded in a fireball that could be seen for miles. The heavy machine gun that would have decimated the compound was now twisted metal scattered across the valley floor, but there were still two more vehicles, and they had seen what happened to their lead truck. Instead of retreating, they accelerated. Racing toward the compound with reckless desperation, Martinez worked the bolt of her rifle and acquired the second vehicle. This shot would be even more difficult. The truck was moving faster now, swerving to avoid the wreckage of the first vehicle. She had perhaps 10 seconds before it cleared the canyon and reached terrain where long-range engagement would be impossible. Her second shot missed by inches, striking the road just behind the vehicle and sending up a shower of rock and dust. The driver, now fully aware that he was being targeted by a sniper, began evasive maneuvers that made accurate shooting nearly impossible. Martinez had one more chance. The third vehicle was following closely behind the second, trying to use it as cover. But Martinez could see that the driver of the third truck was less experienced, maintaining a predictable speed and trajectory even as his comrade was taking evasive action. She shifted her aim to the third vehicle, led the target by what felt like an impossible margin, and fired her last long-range shot of the engagement. This bullet found its mark perfectly, striking the vehicle's fuel tank and creating a secondary explosion that not only eliminated the third truck but also damaged the second vehicle with flying debris and forced it off the road. From 847 meters away, using a standard infantry rifle, Martinez had single-handedly eliminated an entire enemy reinforcement convoy. But her moment of tactical triumph was interrupted by a desperate call over her radio that made her blood freeze. "Doc, Thompson's down. We need you here now." Martinez's descent from the ridge was a controlled fall that would have impressed any mountain warfare instructor. She rappelled down rock faces, leaped across gaps that would have challenged experienced climbers, and covered the 200 meters to the compound in less than 3 minutes. But every second felt like an hour as Thompson's condition deteriorated. She found him exactly where she had left him, but the temporary stimulant she had administered was wearing off rapidly. His face was pale, his breathing was shallow, and the 4 lines she had so carefully established was showing signs that his blood pressure was dropping again. "Talk to me, Thompson," she said, immediately beginning her medical assessment. "The pain shot wore off about 2 minutes ago," he said weakly. "Everything hurts like hell, but I held the position. Nobody got past." Martinez could see evidence of Thompson's determination scattered around his defensive position. Empty ammunition casings, blood spatters where he had continued to fight despite his wound, and 2 enemy fighters who had attempted to flank the position and paid for the mistake with their lives. "You did good," Martinez said, but her professional assessment told a different story. Thompson's wound had reopened during the firefight, and he had lost additional blood that he couldn't afford to lose. His pulse was weak and irregular, his skin was cold and clammy, and his eyes were having difficulty focusing. "Doc," he whispered, "I don't think I'm going to make it to the extraction." Martinez checked her watch. The helicopter was still 5 minutes out, but Thompson needed immediate surgical intervention that she simply couldn't provide in the field. She had already pushed battlefield medicine to its absolute limits, and there was nothing in her medical bag that could address the internal bleeding that was slowly killing him. But Sarah Martinez had not survived the streets of East Los Angeles. Excelled in Navy medical training, and earned her place alongside the world's most elite warriors by accepting limitations. She had succeeded by finding solutions that others couldn't see and by refusing to give up when the situation seemed hopeless. "Thompson, listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "You are not going to die on my watch. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what rules I have to break, and I don't care what procedures I have to improvise. You're going home to your family." What Martinez did next would be studied in military medical schools for years to come. Using a combination of emergency field surgery techniques, improvised equipment, and sheer determination, she began a procedure that had never been attempted under combat conditions, working with instruments that were never designed for surgical use. She reopened Thompson's wound to identify and address the source of internal bleeding. It was a procedure that would challenge a trained surgeon in a fully equipped operating room, and she was attempting it with basic field equipment while under potential enemy fire. "Doc," Thompson said weakly, "this is insane. You could kill me." "You're already dying," Martinez replied matter-of-factly. "This gives you a chance." For 12 minutes, while the sounds of ongoing combat echoed around the compound, Martinez performed surgery that required the steady hands of a neurosurgeon, the tactical awareness of an infantry soldier, and the courage of someone who had already proven she belonged among the world's most elite warriors. She identified the source of bleeding, managed to repair the damaged blood vessel using techniques she had learned in advanced trauma courses, and successfully re-established proper circulation to Thompson's leg. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't by the book, and it certainly wasn't standard operating procedure. But it worked. "Thompson, how do you feel?" she asked as she finished suturing the surgical site. "Like I got hit by a truck," he said, but his voice was stronger and his color was noticeably better. "But I'm alive." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, and Martinez allowed herself a moment of relief. They had done it. Against impossible odds, facing overwhelming enemy forces, they had completed their mission and were bringing everyone home. But their ordeal wasn't over yet. "All stations, this is Extractionburg," came the voice over their radios. "We're taking heavy ground fire from multiple positions. We can't land in the compound. You'll need to move to the secondary extraction point." Martinez felt her heart sink. The secondary extraction point was nearly half a kilometer away, across terrain that was still partially controlled by enemy fighters. Moving Thompson that distance, in his current condition, would be extremely difficult under normal circumstances. Doing it while under fire might be impossible. "How long can you hold?" the team leader asked the helicopter pilot. 5 minutes, maybe 10 if we're lucky. After that, we'll have to abort and come back later. Later might be too late. Thompson was stable for now, but he needed real medical attention within hours, not days. And the enemy reinforcements that Martinez had delayed would eventually reorganize and return in greater numbers. The team leader looked at Martinez with obvious respect. "Doc, can he travel?" Martinez assessed Thompson's condition one more time. The surgical repair she had performed was holding, but any significant jarring could reopen the wound and cause massive bleeding. Moving him rapidly across broken terrain would be like playing Russian roulette with his life, but staying in the compound would be certain death for all of them. "He can travel," Martinez said firmly, "but I'll need to stay with him every step of the way." What she was proposing was tactically complicated and medically dangerous. She would need to monitor Thompson's condition continuously while helping to carry him across hostile terrain under enemy fire. It would require her to be a medic, a tactical operator, and a one-person medical evacuation team all at the same time. "Doc," the team leader said quietly, "you've already done more than anyone could ask. You've saved all our lives tonight." Martinez checked her rifle and secured her medical pack. "The night's not over yet. The movement to the extraction point would later be called one of the most challenging medical evacuations in special operations history. Martinez had rigged an improvised stretcher system that allowed 2 operators to carry Thompson while she maintained constant monitoring of his vital signs and the surgical repair she had performed. But the terrain between the compound and the extraction point was a nightmare of rocky obstacles, steep inclines, and open areas that provided no cover from enemy fire. Worse, intelligence reports indicated that scattered enemy fighters were still active in the area, looking for revenge against the Americans who had decimated their forces. "Movement in 2 minutes," the team leader announced. "Doc, you call the pace. If Thompson can't handle the speed, we slow down. Everyone else adjusts." Martinez appreciated the confidence, but she knew the mathematics of their situation. The helicopter could only wait 10 minutes at most before fuel considerations forced it to leave. The distance to the extraction point was 800 meters across. Difficult terrain. They would need to maintain a pace that could kill Thompson in order to reach safety before the helicopter departed. "Thompson," she said quietly, "this is going to be rough. The pain medication I can give you will help, but you need to tell me immediately if anything feels wrong. Any sharp pain, any numbness, any feeling that something is tearing. Understood?" Thompson nodded, but Martinez could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear of the enemy fighters who might be hunting them, but fear that his condition would slow down the team and get everyone killed. "Doc," he whispered, "if I can't make it, leave me. Don't let me get everyone else killed." "That's not happening," Martinez replied firmly. "We all go home, or none of us do." The movement began under cover of suppressing fire from the remaining team members. Martinez had positioned herself at Thompson's head, constantly monitoring his pulse and breathing while helping to navigate the stretcher through the rocky terrain. Her rifle was slung across her back, ready for immediate use if they encountered enemy fighters. The first 200 meters went smoothly. Thompson's vital signs remained stable, and they made good time across relatively flat ground. But then they reached the steep incline that would take them up to the ridge where the helicopter was waiting. "This is where it gets interesting," Martinez muttered, as she calculated the angle of ascent and the additional stress it would place on Thompson's cardiovascular system. The climb was brutal. The stretcher bearers were forced to essentially carry Thompson's weight vertically while maintaining their footing on loose rock and treacherous terrain. Martinez found herself not just monitoring Thompson's medical condition, but also serving as a climbing guide, identifying the safest routes and helping the team navigate obstacles that could have caused catastrophic falls. Halfway up the ridge, Thompson's condition began to deteriorate. "Doc," he gasped, "something's wrong. Sharp pain in my chest." Martinez immediately signaled for the team to stop. Thompson's pulse was rapid and irregular, his breathing was labored, and his skin was taking on a blue tinge that indicated oxygen deprivation. She recognized the symptoms immediately. He was going into shock, probably caused by a combination of blood loss, physical stress, and the altitude change. They were still 300 meters from the extraction point, on a steep slope that provided no cover and minimal space for medical treatment. The helicopter was already circling overhead, its pilot calling urgently for their position. "Extraction bird, this is ground team," the team leader radioed. "We've got a medical emergency. Need 2 more minutes." "Copy ground team, but we're taking increased fire from the valley. I can give you 90 seconds, then I have to pull out." 90 seconds to stabilize a patient in full shock on a mountainside under enemy fire with improvised equipment. Martinez had trained for impossible scenarios, but this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She began emergency shock treatment, elevating Thompson's legs, administering fluids, and monitoring his airway. But his condition was deteriorating rapidly, and she could see that conventional treatment wasn't going to be enough. That's when Martinez made a decision that would be debated in medical schools for decades to come. "I'm going to try something that's never been done in the field," she told the team leader. "It's experimental, it's dangerous, and if it doesn't work, Thompson dies. But if I don't try it, he dies anyway." Using a combination of medications from her field kit, Martinez began an emergency procedure designed to artificially stimulate Thompson's cardiovascular system and force his body out of shock. It was a technique that had been developed in laboratory settings, but never tested under combat conditions. The procedure required precise timing, exact dosages, and constant monitoring of Thompson's vital signs. One mistake could cause cardiac arrest. But Thompson's condition was deteriorating so rapidly that Martinez calculated they had less than 60 seconds before he would be beyond any medical intervention. She administered the first medication and watched Thompson's vital signs closely. His pulse increased slightly, but his breathing remained labored. She gave him a second injection, adjusting the dosage based on his body weight and current condition. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Thompson's condition continued to worsen, and Martinez began to think she had made a fatal error in judgment. Then, suddenly, his eyes cleared, his breathing steadied, and his pulse strengthened noticeably. "Doc," Thompson said, his voice much stronger than it had been in hours, "whatever you just did, it worked." Martinez allowed herself one moment of relief before focusing on the immediate tactical situation. The helicopter was beginning its final approach to the extraction point, and they still had 200 meters of difficult terrain to cover. "Move," she called to the stretcher bearers. "We've got 30 seconds to get to that bird." The final sprint to the helicopter would test everything they had learned about teamwork, determination, and the refusal to leave anyone behind. The final approach to the extraction point was a race against time that would be remembered as one of the most dramatic rescues in special operations history. The helicopter pilot, despite taking increasing ground fire from enemy fighters who had repositioned to target the landing zone, held his position with a courage that matched anything the ground team had displayed. Martinez ran alongside Thompson's stretcher, monitoring his condition while simultaneously providing tactical guidance to the team. The experimental treatment she had administered was working, but she had no idea how long the effects would last. They might have minutes, or they might have only seconds before Thompson's condition deteriorated beyond recovery. 50 meters, called the team leader as the helicopter came into view. The pilot had positioned the aircraft perfectly, using the natural terrain features to provide maximum protection from enemy fire, while keeping the loading ramp accessible for a wounded evacuation. But Martinez could see tracer rounds beginning to probe the aircraft's position as enemy fighters adjusted their aim. "They've got our range." The pilot's voice was urgent over the radio. "I can hold for 30 more seconds, then I have to go." 25 meters from the helicopter, Thompson's condition began to crash again. The temporary stimulation from Martinez's experimental treatment was wearing off, and his body was returning to the shock state that threatened his life. "Doc, I'm losing him," called one of the stretcher bearers as Thompson's head lolled to one side. Martinez made a decision that violated every protocol in military medicine. Instead of stopping to treat Thompson, she grabbed one corner of the stretcher and began helping to carry him while administering emergency medication on the run. It was medically dangerous, tactically unsound, and absolutely necessary. "Keep moving," she called, even as she managed Thompson's airway with one hand and maintained her grip on the stretcher with the other. "I can keep him stable for another minute." The team reached the helicopter just as enemy fire began to bracket their position with increasing accuracy. Martinez helped load Thompson onto the aircraft while continuing her medical treatment, never pausing in her efforts to keep him alive. But as the helicopter began to lift off, a burst of automatic weapons fire from a concealed enemy position raked the aircraft's tail section. Sparks flew from damaged systems, and the pilot's voice crackled urgently over the intercom. "We've taken hits to the tail rotor. I'm losing control." The helicopter began to spin uncontrollably, and Martinez realized they were about to crash. In that moment, facing what appeared to be certain death, she made one final medical decision that would define her legacy. Instead of securing herself for the crash, Martinez threw her body over Thompson, using herself as a human shield to protect the patient she had fought so hard to save. It was an act of selflessness that embodied everything the Navy Corpsman creed represented. The helicopter hit the ground hard, skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to rest against a boulder outcropping. For several seconds, there was only silence and the sound of settling metal. Then Martinez opened her eyes and realized she was still alive. "Thompson," she called weakly, "talk to me." "Still here, Doc," came the reply, stronger than she had expected. "Whatever you did, it's still working." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Everyone alive back there?" One by one, the team members checked in. Incredibly, despite the violent crash, no one had been seriously injured. The helicopter was damaged beyond flight capability, but they were all alive. "Actual, this is ground team," the team leader radioed. "We're down but functional. Request immediate extraction and medical evacuation." Martinez continued treating Thompson, even as the sound of approaching aircraft filled the air. A second helicopter, supported by fixed-wing gunships, was already en route to extract them from the crash site. 30 minutes later, as Thompson was being loaded onto a medical evacuation aircraft, he grabbed Martinez's arm. "Doc," he said, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life about 6 different times tonight." Martinez smiled tiredly. "That's what we do, Thompson. We bring everyone home." The team leader approached as the medical helicopter prepared to depart. "Martinez," he said, "I owe you an apology. When this mission started, I thought you were just a medic. I was wrong." "No," Martinez replied. "You were right. I am just a medic. But being just a medic means being whatever the mission requires. Sometimes that's medical treatment. Sometimes it's tactical support. Sometimes it's both." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying Thompson toward the advanced medical facility that would complete his recovery, Martinez reflected on the night's events. She had been tested in ways she had never imagined, pushed beyond every limit she thought she had, and proven to herself and others that courage, skill, and determination could overcome any obstacle. The mission had been successful. The high-value target was captured, valuable intelligence was recovered, and most importantly, every member of the team was coming home alive. But for Martinez, the greatest victory was simpler. She had kept her promise. In the most challenging circumstances imaginable, she had been whatever her teammates needed her to be. 3 months later, Martinez would receive the Silver Star for her actions that night. But the real recognition came from her teammates, who had learned that being just a medic could mean being the most dangerous person on the battlefield. The Navy SEALs never again underestimated what a truly exceptional combat medic could accomplish. When courage met skill and determination met opportunity, the weeks following the mission brought a media attention that Sarah Martinez had never wanted and certainly hadn't expected. Word of her extraordinary performance had spread through the special operations community like wildfire, and soon military journalists, documentary filmmakers, and even Hollywood producers were trying to get access to the medic who fought like a SEAL. But Martinez was more interested in the medical debrief than the media circus. At the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, where Thompson was recovering from his injuries, she sat with a panel of military doctors who were struggling to understand how she had accomplished what she had done in the field. "Hospital Corpsman Martinez," said the lead physician, a Navy captain with 30 years of medical experience, "the surgical repair you performed under combat conditions should have been impossible. The precision required, the improvised equipment, the stress environment, Everything about it defies conventional medical wisdom. Martinez shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had never been comfortable with praise, preferring to focus on what she could have done better rather than what she had accomplished. "Sir, I just did what the situation required," she said. "Thompson was dying, and I had the tools and training to prevent that. The tactical situation was secondary to the medical imperative." "But that's exactly what makes this so remarkable," interjected another doctor, a trauma surgeon who had reviewed Martinez's field notes extensively. "You didn't just perform emergency medicine, you revolutionized it. The experimental shock treatment you administered has never been successfully used outside of controlled clinical environments. We're already incorporating your techniques into our advanced trauma protocols." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the conference room door. Thompson entered, walking with only a slight limp that would probably disappear completely within a few months. His recovery had been remarkable, defying the predictions of every doctor who had initially examined him. "Sorry to interrupt," Thompson sighed, "but I wanted to thank Doc Martinez personally before she gets transferred to her new assignment." Martinez looked puzzled. "New assignment?" The Navy captain smiled. "Hospital Corpsman Martinez, you're being transferred to the Special Operations Medical Training Center as a chief instructor. Your mission will be to train the next generation of combat medics using the techniques you developed in Afghanistan." Martinez felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. Training other medics meant that her innovations could save lives far beyond her own direct influence. But it also meant leaving the front lines, leaving the direct patient care that had always been her primary motivation. "Sir," she said carefully, "I appreciate the honor, but I'd prefer to remain with operational teams. That's where I can make the most direct impact." The captain exchanged glances with the other medical officers. "Martinez, you've already made more direct impact than most medics achieve in entire careers. But your knowledge and experience are too valuable to risk on additional deployments. We need you to share what you've learned." Thompson stepped forward. "Doc, if I may, you saved my life using techniques that no one else knew. If you can teach those techniques to other medics, you'll save dozens, maybe hundreds of lives indirectly. That's a bigger impact than any single deployment could achieve." Martinez considered this perspective. She had always measured her success by the individual patients she could save, the specific lives she could preserve. But Thompson was right, teaching others could multiply her impact exponentially. "There's something else," the captain continued. "The Secretary of the Navy has approved your commissioning as an officer. You're being promoted to lieutenant, and your new position will come with command authority over the entire Special Operations Medical Training Program." The promotion was unprecedented. Martinez would be jumping from enlisted to officer rank, based purely on her combat performance and medical innovations. It was recognition of her extraordinary contributions, but it also meant accepting responsibilities she had never sought. "Sir, I'm honored by the confidence, but I'm not sure I'm ready for command responsibilities." Thompson laughed. "Doc, you commanded a battlefield medical operation while simultaneously conducting precision sniper fire at ranges most people can't even see. You directed tactical operations while performing surgery under fire. If that's not command experience, I don't know what is." Over the following days, Martinez struggled with the decision. She visited Thompson regularly during his recovery, and their conversations often focused on the broader implications of her experiences in Afghanistan. "You know what still amazes me about that night?" Thompson said during one of their discussions. "It wasn't just your medical skills or your shooting. It was your ability to see the entire tactical picture while focusing on individual patient care. Most people can do one or the other. You did both simultaneously." Martinez had been thinking about this herself. Her success in Afghanistan hadn't come from being exceptionally good at one thing. It had come from her ability to integrate multiple skill sets and adapt to rapidly changing situations. "I think that's what combat medicine really is," she said. "It's not just treating injuries. It's understanding how medical care fits into the larger mission, how to position yourself to provide maximum benefit, how to anticipate what's going to be needed before it happens." "That's exactly why they want you to teach," Thompson replied. "Most medics are trained to think about medicine as separate from tactics. You prove that the best combat medics think about both as part of the same mission." Martinez realized that Thompson was right, but accepting the position would mean fundamentally changing her relationship with military medicine. Instead of being a practitioner, she would become an educator. Instead of saving individual lives, she would be preparing others to save lives. But perhaps that was evolution rather than abandonment of her original goals. "Thompson," she said finally, "if I take this position, will you help me develop the curriculum? Your perspective as someone who experienced these techniques firsthand would be invaluable." Thompson smiled. "Doc, I'd be honored. But only if you promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't let them turn you into just another instructor. Keep that edge that made you so effective in the field. The medics you're going to train need to learn not just your techniques, but your mindset." Martinez nodded, understanding what he meant. The real lesson from Afghanistan wasn't about specific medical procedures or tactical techniques. It was about the refusal to accept limitations, the willingness to attempt the impossible, and the determination to bring everyone home. 6 months later, at the Special Operations Medical Training Center in North Carolina, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood before her first class of advanced combat medics. The students were all experienced hospital corpsmen who had volunteered for the most challenging medical training the military offered. They had heard rumors about their new instructor, but nothing had prepared them for the intensity she brought to the classroom. "Gentlemen and ladies," Martinez began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had proven herself under the most extreme conditions. "Everything you think you know about combat medicine is probably wrong." The students exchanged glances. Most of them had multiple deployments and years of experience treating combat casualties. They weren't accustomed to having their expertise challenged so directly. "You've been trained to think of yourselves as medics who happen to be in combat zones," Martinez continued, pacing in front of the classroom with the same energy she had once brought to mountain climbing under fire. "That's backwards. You need to think of yourselves as warriors who happen to have advanced medical training." She clicked a remote, and the classroom screen displayed a tactical map of the Afghanistan compound where her legend had been born. "Let me tell you a story about a mission that changed how the special operations community thinks about combat medicine. It's a story about what happens when a medic stops thinking about medicine and tactics as separate disciplines and starts thinking about them as integrated components of a single mission." For the next hour, Martinez walked her students through every decision point of that night in Afghanistan. But instead of focusing on the dramatic moments, the long-range shots, the experimental medical procedures, the helicopter crash, she concentrated on the decision-making processes that had made those actions possible. "The question isn't whether you can make an 800-meter shot while monitoring a patient's vital signs," she explained. "The question is whether you can analyze a tactical situation quickly enough to recognize when that shot becomes necessary for patient survival." One of the students, a seasoned corpsman with deployments in Iraq and Syria, raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, what you're describing sounds more like special operations training than medical training." Martinez smiled. It was exactly the question she had been hoping for. "Petty Officer Rodriguez, how do you define your primary mission as a combat medic?" "To provide medical care to wounded personnel, ma'am." "Wrong," Martinez replied immediately. "Your primary mission is to ensure mission success while minimizing casualties. Medical care is one tool for accomplishing that mission, but it's not the only tool." She clicked to the next slide, which showed casualty statistics from various military operations. Traditional combat medics focus on treating injuries after they occur. But the most effective combat medics prevent injuries from occurring in the first place. That requires understanding tactics, terrain, enemy capabilities, and mission objectives just as thoroughly as you understand anatomy and pharmacology. The training program that Martinez developed over the following months was unlike anything the military had ever attempted. Students learned advanced trauma surgery alongside precision marksmanship. They studied battlefield tactics while practicing emergency procedures. They trained in mountain warfare, urban combat, and maritime operations, all while maintaining their focus on medical excellence. But the most challenging part of the program wasn't the physical demands or the technical complexity. It was the mental transformation Martinez demanded from her students. "I want you to think about your last deployment," she said during one particularly intense training session. "Remember a time when you were treating a casualty and wished you could do something about the tactical situation that had caused the injury. Tell me about that moment." The stories that emerged were remarkably similar. Medics who had watched preventable injuries occur because they weren't in position to provide tactical input. Medical personnel who had seen patterns in enemy behavior but had no mechanism for sharing that intelligence with combat units. Corpsmen who had identified tactical vulnerabilities but felt their role restricted them to medical responses only. Every one of those situations represents a failure of integration, Martinez explained. Not a failure of medical care, but a failure to recognize that combat medicine and tactical operations are parts of the same system. The breakthrough moment came during a field exercise that Martinez had designed to replicate the complexity of her Afghanistan experience. Students were required to provide medical support for a simulated special operations raid while also contributing to tactical decision-making and, when necessary, direct combat operations. Most of the students initially struggled with the integrated approach. They were comfortable being medics and they were comfortable being soldiers, but thinking about both roles simultaneously proved challenging. "Ma'am," said one student after a particularly difficult exercise, "this is really hard." "How?" "Do you switch between thinking like a medic and thinking like a tactical operator?" "You don't switch," Martinez replied. "That's the point. You think like both at the same time." The medic mindset and the tactical mindset are opposites. They're complementary perspectives on the same mission. Over time, the students began to internalize this approach. Their medical decision-making improved because they better understood the tactical context of injuries. Their tactical awareness increased because they recognized how medical considerations affected operational planning. But perhaps more importantly, they began to develop the confidence that had defined Martinez's performance in Afghanistan. The confidence to attempt the seemingly impossible when the mission demanded it. Lieutenant Martinez, said the training center commander during one of their regular evaluation meetings, "Your students are achieving proficiency levels we've never seen before. But they're also developing something else, a mindset that conventional military medical training has never produced." Martinez nodded. "Sir, they're learning that being just a medic doesn't mean accepting limitations. It means being whatever the mission requires, whenever it requires it." The success of Martinez's program was attracting attention from military medical communities around the world. But for Martinez, the real measure of success would come when her students faced their own impossible situations and discovered that they had been prepared not just with techniques and procedures, but with the mindset to transcend whatever limitations others might try to impose on them. 2 years after that fateful night in Afghanistan, Sarah Martinez found herself standing in the Pentagon, preparing to brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the revolutionary changes her training program had brought to military medicine. The small conference room was filled with the highest-ranking military officers in the United States, but Martinez felt the same calm focus she had experienced on that Afghan mountainside. "Gentlemen, ma'am, she began, addressing the assembled generals and admirals. I'm here to discuss how we can fundamentally transform military medicine by changing not what we teach, but how we think about the role of combat medics in modern warfare. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a Marine Corps general with 4 decades of experience, leaned forward with interest. Lieutenant Martinez, your training program has produced remarkable results, but some of our traditional medical officers are concerned that you're training medics to be commandos rather than healers. Martinez had anticipated this concern. It was the same skepticism she had faced throughout her career, the persistent belief that medical personnel should be confined to purely medical roles. Sir, with respect, that perspective assumes that healing and fighting are mutually exclusive activities. My experience, and the experience of the hundreds of medics we've trained, suggests the opposite. The most effective healers in combat environments are those who understand warfare well enough to prevent injuries, not just treat them. She clicked to her first slide, which showed comparative casualty statistics from units that had deployed with her program's graduates versus units with traditionally trained medics. Units with our graduates show a 47% reduction in preventable casualties, a 23% improvement in mission success rates, and most significantly, a 62% increase in what we call tactical medical interventions, situations where medical personnel directly contributed to mission success through non-medical actions. The Air Force Chief of Staff studied the statistics carefully. These numbers are impressive, but how do we know the correlation isn't coincidental? Perhaps your graduates are simply being assigned to more elite units. Actually, sir, it's the opposite, Martinez replied. We've been tracking our graduates in conventional units, special operations, and everything in between. The performance improvements are consistent across all assignment types. She advanced to the next slide, which showed testimonials from commanders who had worked with her program's graduates. What we're seeing is that medics trained in integrated tactical medical thinking don't just perform better medical care, they make entire units more effective. They anticipate problems, identify solutions, and contribute to mission success in ways that traditional medical training never enabled. The Army Chief of Staff, who had been quietly reviewing the briefing materials, looked up with a question. Lieutenant Martinez, your personal story in Afghanistan has become somewhat legendary. But can this approach be scaled beyond individual exceptional performers? Are you training medics, or are you trying to replicate Sarah Martinez? It was perhaps the most important question of the entire briefing, and Martinez had been thinking about it since she first began developing her curriculum. Sir, that's exactly the right question, and it gets to the heart of what we've learned. What happened in Afghanistan wasn't the result of exceptional individual talent. It was the result of integrated thinking that can be taught, learned, and systematized. She clicked to her final slide, which showed a simple diagram illustrating the difference between traditional medical training and her integrated approach. Traditional training teaches medical skills and tactical awareness as separate subjects. Students learn to be good medics and good soldiers, but they learn to think about those roles as distinct and sequential. Our approach teaches students to think about medical and tactical considerations as aspects of the same problem-solving process. The Navy Chief of Operations, who had been Martinez's ultimate superior when she was an enlisted corpsman, smiled with obvious pride. Lieutenant Martinez, what you're describing sounds like a fundamental shift in military culture. Not just medical training. Yes, sir, it is. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. We're not just changing how medics think about medicine, we're changing how the entire military thinks about the integration of different skill sets and perspectives. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs stood, indicating that the formal briefing was concluding. Lieutenant Martinez, the Joint Chiefs will need to discuss the broader implications of what you're proposing. But I want you to know that your work represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need as warfare continues to evolve. As the meeting ended and the senior officers filed out, the chairman approached Martinez personally. "Lieutenant, off the record, do you ever miss being just a medic?" Martinez considered the question carefully. "Sir, I've learned that I was never just anything. That night in Afghanistan didn't change who I was, it revealed who I had always been. The same is true for every medic we train. We're not creating something new. We're uncovering potential that was always there." The chairman nodded thoughtfully. "And that's perhaps the most important lesson of all." 3 months later, Martinez's integrated training approach was approved for implementation across all branches of military medicine. The program that had begun with her own refusal to accept limitations had become the new standard for how America trained its combat medics. But for Martinez, the real victory wasn't institutional recognition or career advancement. It was the knowledge that medics serving in combat zones around the world were now equipped not just with medical skills, but with the mindset to be whatever their missions required. They would never be just medics. They would be warriors, healers, tacticians, and lifesavers, all integrated into a single, uncompromising commitment to bringing everyone home. The legend of Sarah Martinez had become something more powerful than any individual story. It had become a new way of thinking about courage, capability, and the refusal to accept artificial limitations on what one person could accomplish when lives depended on their performance. In the end, they had said she was just a medic. She had proven that there was no such thing as just anything, only the limitations we accept and the potential we choose to unlock. Her story continued in every medic who refused to be confined by others' expectations, who integrated skills that others kept separate, and who understood that being the best at any job meant being willing to transcend the traditional boundaries of that job. The Navy SEALs had been shocked by her combat skills. But the real shock was the realization that extraordinary performance comes not from exceptional individuals, but from ordinary people who refuse to accept ordinary limitations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.